Hello, my name is Stuart Buckin. I'm 16 years old and this is my third year attending the International School of Bangkok. Today I'll be talking about how different ways of knowing have affected my learning experiences in the English field and how it affected my understanding of the world and made me grow as a learner.
What is a specific example of your learning experiences in the English field that has helped you grow as a learner?
A specific example of my learning experiences in the English field would be IBSL Language and Literature. I'll be talking about the class itself and how it has affected my understanding of the world and helped my growth as a learner. IBSL Language and Literature is a class which I have been taking for nearly 2 years now, my 11th and 12th grade years. In IBSL Language and Literature, students learn to analyze techniques, explore the writing styles of numerous authors, and create our own pieces of work based on our own take to the class, with our interests and emotions portrayed in them. During the course of this year, I have discovered that I am taking more of an approach to the class of not creating work that the teacher will mark well, but rather creating work that I want to experiment with, want to take risks with, and want to feel proud about when the final draft is completed. Therefore, it has taught me as a student to take risks that can be very beneficial to us. Some main areas of focus in the class are writing styles of authors and creating our own pieces.
You've given us a brief introduction to IBSL language and literature. However, how has different ways of knowing affected your learning specifically?
Now that I've introduced some areas of focus in IBSL language and literature, it can be linked to the different ways of knowing. Through reading many forms of literature, we as readers can begin to recognize the different writing styles of authors and how it contributes to their pieces and overall understanding of the world. Language is a way of knowing because it is a vital method we use to acquire knowledge about the world, often through communication. As examining authors of literature from different cultural backgrounds is a large part of the English course, language is definitely related to the concept. Writers such as Edgar Allan Poe write about the inevitability of death in a varying, slightly insane and condescending voice, whereas authors like Annie Dillard write more about religion and nature in a present, calming voice. Being able to recognize these differences through language allows us to understand more about each author and the cultural backgrounds they were brought up in. It allows us to understand them more as a person and to ultimately understand more about the world that we live in. However, language is a powerful way of knowing, and through an author's use of it, it may also come bias. Our personal bias towards an author due to their language may construct a barrier between us and knowledge. Not wishing to learn about an author due to personal motives, where it may be they are too boring or too offensive, does not allow us to broaden our knowledge and develop as readers. Therefore, this may create limitations as we may stray away from an important factor in the author's writing, and ultimately limit our potential expanding of knowledge on the world as growth as learners. Using the allegory of the cave, in which light from a fire casts shadows onto a wall, whereas sunlight doesn't reach it, we can relate this limitation we may have through bias to perceived reality versus ultimate reality. What we interpret due to our bias blocking our potential understanding is what we can see, yet the true meaning, the ultimate reality, is one which we may not get to see. Realizing the problem in this, the course adapts to reading many books throughout the year. The result of this is that the literature can free us from the constraints of reality and help us in turn escape the cave, overall showing us how to grow as a reader and a learner, and allowing us to make our own conclusion based on our learning to apply to the world. The conclusions that we personally apply to the world are made up of both reason and emotion. While reason and emotion may seem like two different things, they are actually closely related and can show a reflection of ourselves if we place our decisions and conclusions on an emotion-reason spectrum. Because too little emotion or too much emotion would cloud our judgment and result in poor conclusions and decisions, we can see that it is very irrational to deduce these conclusions and decisions without being in the middle of the spectrum, adding an even amount of emotion and reason into them. Whereas the reason of our decisions comes through our personal conclusions on the world through learning, emotion can be derived from another area, of course, creating our own pieces of work. Through creating our own work in English, we effectively portray ourselves as a person and produce a creative piece of work that depicts our interests and, more importantly, our emotions. Emotion is a way of knowing because it heavily impacts our knowledge, much like language, yet doesn't have to involve any direct communication. As using what we learn through author study and analysis of text to develop our own writing style and thought processes, we write emotion into our pieces, therefore being relatable to the way of knowing. Our emotion and interest will tend to pull us over to what we would like to write about and how we would like to write it. This is an incredibly powerful way of knowing, as using knowledge which we derive from other authors, we can create work ourselves showing emotion which can inspire others to create their own. Emotions can be communicated through the page without having any physical contact, and because of this, a student reading the assignment can feel what you desired them to feel through the use of emotion. Without emotion in a piece, it can be very boring to read and would not be able to inspire others through reading the work, and in turn not help others develop their own understanding of the world and grow as learners. This example can relate to thin slicing and Antonio Damasio's theories towards emotion. If a student reads a piece I created and put emotion into, then immediately they will gather two reactions from the paper, one being their opinion on me based on my writing style, and the second being the action programs that will run in their brain to feel the desirable emotion in the piece. Relating back to the language and how I discussed analysis on an author's writing style, this is done through thin slicing, as a student would do to my work. What I gathered about the author by reading their work is the same as what a student will gather about me through reading my work. During and after reading the piece, they will follow suit into feeling emotions throughout the text I created, and their own analytical take on it, without having to do much thinking, again relating back to the previous topic. Therefore, it is apparent that these topics are related, much so as well the ways of knowing. Because these topics are related, we can apply emotion to the language concept and analyze the writing styles of authors through an emotional take. While a linguistic approach allows us to form knowledge based on the writing styles of authors as a whole, emotion allows us to form knowledge based on the individual parts that make their writing so unique. An example of this would be the author's use of voice, tone, and style. With a linguistic approach, these three concepts seem very similar, whereas with an emotional approach, they can be seen as vastly different, again relating back to the emotion-reason continuum. The author's use of voice, tone, and style can trigger emotion in different areas of the brain to give us a much deeper and clearer understanding of the knowledge we could derive from the text rather than simply viewing it with a linguistic approach and possibly not being able to reach the deeper understanding.
What do you know about yourself that will change how you approach learning in the future?
Through the units studied in senior seminar, being language, perception, reason, and emotion, I have learned that the topics from each can be applied to everyday life. Being able to connect these topics to areas of knowing such as English, it has allowed me to grasp upon an understanding that knowing is a very limited concept. Presently, and for my approach to learning in the future, I will be conscious that knowledge is limited and we have very few ways of exchanging it. Because we have very few ways of exchanging it, being the units we have studied in senior seminar, rather than deducing it from a single area of knowing, it is important to base our knowledge on each area of knowing to give us both a deeper understanding and stronger knowledge than what we would have through a single way of knowing. IB Language and Literature has impacted me currently as a learner, and the skills I have developed through the class, with further understanding from senior seminar, will be present in my learning in the future.